The crimson dust of Kepler 742b swirled around Lieutenant Ethan Blackwood's boots as he crested another ridge of the alien world's endless desert. The twin suns cast double shadows behind him, stretching like dark fingers across the rust-colored landscape. 6 months of searching had led his team to these coordinates, where ancient sensor readings suggested the presence of non-natural structures beneath the sand. Ethan adjusted his environmental suit's settings, grateful for the cooling system as he studied the horizon through his helmet's heads-up display. The excavation team worked methodically below, their machines humming as they cleared centuries of accumulated sediment from what appeared to be a doorway carved into the rock face. Lieutenant Blackwood, Dr. Raven's voice crackled through his comm, "We're picking up some unusual energy signatures from the structure. Nothing like what we've seen in other ruins." "Copy that," Ethan replied, making his way down the ridge. "What's the variance?" Before Raven could answer, a shimmer in the air caught Ethan's attention. The space before him seemed to fold, and suddenly he wasn't alone on the ridge. A tall, ethereal figure materialized, clearly not human, with iridescent skin that seemed to capture and reflect the light of both suns. The alien's movement was impossibly graceful as it steadied itself, clearly as surprised by the encounter as he was. Its large, luminescent eyes fixed on him with an intelligence that transcended species barriers. "I am Naira," the being spoke, its universal translator creating perfectly accented English. "Lead researcher of the Celestian Scientific Academy. We detected the same energy signature as your team." Ethan maintained his professional composure, though his heart raced at this unprecedented first contact situation. "Lieutenant Ethan Blackwood, Earth Xenoarchaeological Corps. We weren't aware the Celestians had interests in this sector." The ruins beneath us, Naira gestured with a hand that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, they bear markings similar to artifacts found in our own historical records. We believe they may be connected to the predecessors. A tremor ran through the ground, interrupting their introduction. The excavation site below erupted into chaos as previously dormant systems began to activate. Ancient machinery groaned to life, and the door the team had been clearing sealed itself with a thunderous boom. "Everyone clear the area." Ethan shouted into his comm, but his warning came too late. The ground beneath Naira began to crack, ancient defense mechanisms triggering after millennia of silence. Without hesitation, Ethan launched himself forward. His augmented muscles, designed for the higher gravity of Earth, propelled him across the distance just as the ground gave way. He grabbed Naira's arm, pulling her to safety as razor-sharp energy beams sliced through the space she had occupied moments before. The force of his movement sent them both rolling across the ridge. Ethan instinctively positioned himself to shield the Celestian researcher from the sharp rocks. When they came to a stop, he found himself staring into those luminescent eyes, now wide with surprise and something else, recognition. "You risked injury to save me," Naira stated, her translator unable to fully convey the wonder in her voice. "Why?" Ethan helped her up, wincing at the cuts and bruises he'd sustained. "It's what humans do. We protect others, regardless of species." The ruins below them pulsed with an ominous light, and new energy signatures began to emerge from the ancient structure. Both human and Celestian teams scrambled to establish a safe perimeter, but Ethan and Naira remained on the ridge, studying each other with newfound curiosity. "Perhaps," Naira said softly, "there is much our peoples can learn from each other." She reached out, touching his injured arm with gentle concern. Where her fingers made contact, a subtle glow spread, and Ethan felt the pain begin to ease. "Lieutenant." Dr. Raven's voice cut through the moment. "The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's down there, it's waking up." Ethan looked from the chaos below to the enigmatic being beside him, knowing that this was just the beginning of something far greater than either of them could imagine. The ruins held secrets that could reshape both their civilizations, but first, they would have to survive what those secrets had in store for them. The twin suns continued their eternal dance overhead, casting ever-changing shadows across the ancient site that had just become ground zero for humanity's most important first contact. And somewhere in the depths below, machinery that had slumbered for eons continued its awakening, its purpose yet unknown but its power undeniable. The emergency shelter hummed with activity as both human and Celestian teams worked to process the cascade of data flowing from the ruins. Ethan sat at a monitoring station, trying to ignore the strange sensations coursing through his body where Naira's touch had healed him hours earlier. The skin there still glowed faintly, tracing patterns that matched the ancient symbols and now pulsing from the buried structure. "These readings make no sense," Dr. Raven muttered, running another scan on Ethan's arm. "The cellular changes suggest some kind of quantum entanglement effect, but that's impossible at a biological level." Naira moved closer, her own skin shimming with increased intensity as she approached Ethan. "Not impossible," she corrected, her voice carrying an undertone of concern. "The predecessors were known to experiment with consciousness transfer technology. Our histories speak of it, though we always considered them legends." The holographic displays surrounding them flickered with new data as another tremor shook the shelter. The ruins below had been actively resisting all attempts at further exploration, generating energy barriers that defied both human and Celestian scanning technology. "Lieutenant Blackwood," Commander Walsh's voice cut through the tension as she entered the room. "The Celestian High Council is demanding we cease all operations immediately. They're claiming exclusive rights to this site based on their historical records." Ethan glanced at Naira, catching a flash of dismay across her ethereal features. "That's not possible," Naira interjected. "My research clearly shows the ruins contain elements from both our cultures. This site belongs to our shared history." "Try telling that to the battle cruiser they've dispatched," Walsh replied grimly. "They're citing some ancient claim about predecessor artifacts being sacred to their species." The commander's words were interrupted by another violent tremor. This time, the holographic displays exploded with activity, ancient symbols cascading across every screen. Ethan felt a sharp resonance with the markings on his arm, and beside him, Naira gasped. "You feel it too?" he asked, noticing how the patterns on his skin pulsed in sync with her natural bioluminescence. "The ruins," she whispered, "they're not just responding to our presence. They're choosing." Before anyone could question her meaning, the ground shook with unprecedented force. Emergency alerts blared as sensors detected massive energy spikes from the buried structure. Through the shelter's reinforced windows, they watched in awe as massive sections of the desert floor began to shift and rise. "Everyone out," Walsh ordered, but Ethan remained frozen, transfixed by the sight before them. The rising structures weren't random, they were forming a pattern, one that matched exactly the markings now burning on his arm. "Naira," he called out, fighting through the strange resonance overwhelming his senses. "The symbols, what do they mean?" The Celestian researcher moved closer, her own luminescence pulsing rapidly. "They're not just symbols, Ethan. They're a key, and somehow." She placed her hand over the glowing marks on his arm. "We've become part of the lock." The moment their skin made contact, both of them were hit with a wave of information, images, concepts, and emotions that transcended language. They saw glimpses of the predecessor's civilization, of a grand experiment to bridge the gap between different forms of consciousness. "That's why the ruins activated," Ethan realized, his voice rough with understanding. "They were waiting for proof that different species could connect, could trust each other enough to share consciousness," Naira finished, her luminescence synchronizing perfectly with the glow of his markings. "The healing was just the beginning. When I helped you, it created a link that the ruins recognized." Commander Walsh's voice cut through their revelation. "Whatever's happening, it needs to wait. The Celestian cruiser just dropped out of FTL, and they're charging weapons." Ethan looked at Naira, seeing his own determination reflected in her otherworldly eyes. They both knew that what was happening here was bigger than political claims or territorial disputes. The predecessors hadn't left them a weapon or a treasure, they'd left them a choice. "We need to get back to the ruins," he said, already moving toward the door. "Before anyone can stop what's been set in motion." Naira fell into step beside him, her movement now perfectly matched to his own. "The High Council doesn't understand. If they interrupt the process now." Another tremor rocked the shelter, and through the windows, they could see new structures continuing to rise from the desert floor, forming what looked increasingly like an enormous circuit board etched into the planet's surface. The price of trust, Ethan realized, wasn't just in the initial sacrifice. It was in what came after, the willingness to keep moving forward together, even when everything you thought you knew was changing. As he and Naira raced against time to prevent an interstellar incident, he couldn't help but wonder if this was what the predecessors had been waiting for all along, proof that different species could not only coexist but transform each other in ways that transcended their individual limitations. The desert wind howled around Ethan and Naira as they approached the massive circuit-like patterns now etched into the planet's surface. The twin suns had begun to set, casting long shadows through the forest of newly emerged structures. Above them, the Celestian battle cruiser loomed like a storm cloud, its weapons still charged but holding fire. "They're scanning us," Naira said, her voice tight with concern. Her natural luminescence had grown stronger, now pulsing in complex patterns that matched the glowing lines spreading across the ground beneath their feet. "The High Council must have detected the changes in my biosignature." Ethan fought back a wave of dizziness as more symbols flickered across his vision. The connection between them had grown stronger with each passing hour, and now he could sense Naira's emotions as clearly as his own, her fear for her people, her excitement at the discovery, and something deeper, more personal, that neither of them had dared to acknowledge. "The ruins," he managed, pointing to a central structure that rose like a spire from the geometric patterns. "They're trying to tell us something." The markings on his arm burned with increasing intensity as they drew closer. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shuddered, and new holographic displays burst from the circuit-like patterns. But unlike the previous manifestations, these images were clear, deliberate, a message left by the predecessors themselves. "By the stars," Naira breathed, her luminescence synchronizing with the holograms. "It's a warning." The images showed a cascade of worlds, each connected by the same circuit-like patterns they now stood upon. As they watched, the patterns activated in sequence, creating a network that spanned entire galaxies. But something went wrong, the network became unstable, and entire solar systems began to vanish. That's why they abandoned these sites, Ethan realized, the knowledge somehow flowing through their shared connection. The network was too powerful, too unstable. They couldn't control it. "And now it's activating again," Naira added, her hand finding his as another tremor shook the ground. Where their skin met, the glow intensified, and more information flooded their joined consciousness. "But this time it's different." A new series of holograms appeared, showing variations of their own species, humans and Celestians working together, their different approaches to consciousness and technology creating something new, something stable. "The healing," Ethan said, understanding dawning. "Your ability to share energy, combined with human neural patterns, we're not just receiving a warning. We're the solution they were trying to create." Above them, the battle cruiser's engines flared as it moved into attack position. Commander Walsh's voice crackled through Ethan's comm, "Lieutenant, multiple energy signatures are appearing across the sector. Whatever's happening down there, it's spreading to other worlds." "The network is rebuilding itself," Naira said, her grip on Ethan's hand tightening. "But it needs guidance, needs proof that different species can work in true harmony." Her luminescence surged, and Ethan felt her consciousness brush against his more deliberately. "Show me again," she whispered. "Show me why humans protect others without hesitation." Ethan opened his mind fully to her, sharing not just the moment he'd saved her but a lifetime of human experiences, triumph and failure, love and loss, the endless drive to reach beyond their limitations. In return, he felt her share the Celestian perspective, the beauty of collective consciousness, the deep appreciation for the patterns that connected all living things. The spire before them began to pulse in response, its energy signature changing from chaotic to harmonious. Similar reports began coming in from other sites across the sector as the network adjusted itself to their joined consciousness. The predecessors didn't fail, Ethan realized. They were waiting. All these sites, all these worlds, they were waiting for species who could bridge the gap between individual and collective consciousness. Between instinct and intellect. Between sacrifice and synthesis, Naira added, her form now glowing so brightly it rivaled the setting suns. The battle cruiser above them powered down its weapons as the Celestian High Council received the same revelations through their own activated sites. The network wasn't a weapon to be claimed or a treasure to be hoarded, it was a test, and a gift, meant for species who could overcome their differences to create something greater than themselves. But as Ethan and Naira stood at the heart of this awakening, they sensed something else stirring within the network. The predecessors had left more than just a test, they had left a challenge. And somewhere out in the darkness between stars, something was responding to the network's activation, something that would test not just their newfound connection, but the very limits of what their species could achieve together. The first attack came without warning. Dark shapes emerged from fold space around multiple network sites, their vessels unlike anything either humanity or the Celestians had encountered. They moved with impossible precision, targeting the newly activated structures with weapons that seemed to bend reality itself. Multiple contacts at all major sites, Commander Walsh's voice crackled through the emergency channel. They're not responding to any attempts at communication. Ethan and Naira stood within the central spire, their joined consciousness now fully integrated with the predecessor network. Through it, they could sense the attacker's true nature, remnants of a third species, one that had rejected the predecessor's vision of unity. The severed, Naira whispered, the name coming to them through their connection to the network. They chose isolation over integration, perfecting technology that would let them exist without any form of shared consciousness. The ground shook as the first enemy vessels entered atmosphere. Through the network, Ethan and Naira could feel other sites going dark as the Severed's weapons disrupted the delicate patterns of connection the predecessors had created. They're not just attacking the network, Ethan realized, sharing the insight with Naira through their link. They're trying to prevent what we've achieved, the proof that different forms of consciousness can coexist. The spire's internal chambers shifted, revealing new holographic interfaces. The predecessor's final message became clear, they had foreseen this confrontation. The network wasn't just a test of cooperation, it was a defense system, designed to protect the very possibility of connection itself. We can activate it, Naira said, her luminescence synchronizing with the spire's pulsing energy. But the power requirements. She turned to Ethan, her otherworldly eyes filled with both love and fear. It would require a total joining of consciousness. We might not survive as separate individuals. Above them, the battle raged between Earth and Celestian ships against the Severed's reality-bending vessels. But Ethan knew the real battle would be fought here, in this moment of choice. How many times have humans faced extinction? He asked, taking her glowing hands in his. How many times have we stood at the edge of annihilation and chosen to leap forward instead of back? Through their connection, he shared humanity's greatest moments of crisis and triumph, the countless times they had risked everything for the chance at something greater. Naira's consciousness surged against his, sharing her own species' journey, their evolution from solitary beings to a collective consciousness that still preserved individual identity. Perhaps, she said, her voice both physical and mental, that is why the predecessors chose our species. We both know the value of connection, even in the face of loss. The chamber's energy intensified as the Severed's weapons began to breach the outer defenses. Through the network, they could feel other sites falling, could sense the fear and determination of both humans and Celestians as they fought against an enemy that threatened not just their lives, but the very possibility of understanding between species. There's another way, Ethan said suddenly, the solution appearing in their shared consciousness. The predecessors didn't intend for us to sacrifice our individuality, they wanted us to prove it was possible to be both one and many. Naira's luminescence pulsed with understanding. A resonance cascade, she breathed. Using the very thing that makes us different to create something new. They moved in perfect synchronization, their joined consciousness interfacing with the spire's controls. The network responded, its patterns shifting to accommodate their unique combination of human neural architecture and celestian energy manipulation. Together? Ethan asked, though the question was merely formal. Through their connection, he could feel her absolute commitment matching his own. Together, Naira confirmed, her glow merging with the patterns on his skin until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. As the severed breached the final defenses, Ethan and Naira initiated the cascade. The network came alive with unprecedented power, their combined consciousness acting as both catalyst and guide. They felt their awareness expand across the activated sites, felt the strength of every human and celestian fighting to protect the future they represented. But even as their consciousness spread through the network, preparing to confront the Severt's assault, both Ethan and Naira knew that the greatest challenge still lay ahead. The power flowing through them was changing them in ways neither species had experienced before, and the outcome remained uncertain. The only thing they knew for sure was that they would face it as they had faced everything since that first moment on the ridge, together, proving that the greatest strength comes not from isolation, but from the willingness to risk everything for connection. The network blazed with unprecedented power as Ethan and Naira's joined consciousness spread through its ancient pathways. The Severt's ships pressed their attack, their reality-warping weapons creating distortions in spacetime itself. But where their weapons touched the network now, they found something new, a harmony of human determination and celestian energy that adapted faster than their technology could destroy. Through their expanded awareness, Ethan and Naira could see the full scope of the battle unfolding across multiple star systems. Earth and Celestian ships fought side by side, their different tactical approaches complementing each other in ways that kept the Severt's forces off balance. But it wasn't enough, the enemy's technological superiority was still overwhelming. They're trying to isolate the network nodes, Naira's consciousness pulsed through their connection. If they succeed, they won't. Ethan's response carried all the steel of humanity's relentless spirit. Through their link, he could feel the network responding to their combined will, revealing capabilities the predecessors had hidden away until this moment. The spire's chamber transformed around them, its crystalline surfaces reflecting the pure energy now flowing through their joined being. In that moment of perfect synthesis, they understood the predecessors' true legacy, not just the technology they'd left behind, but the proof that evolution itself depended on connection, on the willing exchange of strength between different forms of life. Show them, Ethan whispered, his voice both physical and mental. Show them what they've forgotten. Naira's luminescence surged as she grasped his intent. Together, they reached through the network, not to attack the severed, but to share with them the very thing they feared, the experience of connection itself. Through every active node of the network, they broadcast not just their own joined consciousness, but the accumulated wisdom of both their species. Human art and music flowed alongside celestian energy harmonics. Earth's countless stories of individuals standing together against impossible odds merged with the Celestians' deep understanding of universal patterns. The Severt's attack faltered as their ship's crews received this unexpected transmission. Some tried to resist, their isolation protocols fighting against the wave of shared experience. But others, perhaps remembering what their own species had lost, began to respond. They're not evil, Naira realized, sensing the fear and loneliness hidden beneath the Severt's aggression. They're afraid. Afraid of losing themselves in connection. Then let's show them they don't have to, Ethan responded, drawing on generations of human experience with maintaining individuality within communities. Together, they refined their transmission, demonstrating through their own joined consciousness how connection could strengthen rather than erase individual identity. They showed the severed that unity didn't mean uniformity, that the most powerful forms of connection were those that celebrated difference rather than erasing it. The effect rippled through space like a wave of light. One by one, the severed ships powered down their weapons. Through the network, Ethan and Naira could sense the ancient barriers in their enemies' minds beginning to crack, allowing the first tentative threads of connection to form. But the power required for this transformation was taking its toll. The network blazed with energies that threatened to overwhelm even their joined consciousness. Warning signals flashed through the spire as systems began to overload. "We have to shut it down," Naira's awareness pulsed with concern. "The network can't sustain this level of power." "But if we do, the connection will be lost," Ethan protested, feeling the fragile bridges they'd built with the severed beginning to waver. In that moment of crisis, both of them understood what the predecessors had known all along, that the greatest connections weren't maintained by technology or power, but by choice. By the willing decision to remain open to others, even in the face of difference and fear. Together, they began the controlled shutdown of the network, but not before sending one final transmission, not just to the severed, but to all three species. They shared their own story, from that first moment of sacrifice on the ridge to this final choice to trust in connection over power. As the network's energy faded, Ethan and Naira felt their expanded consciousness beginning to recede. But unlike their fears, they didn't lose themselves or their connection. Instead, they emerged transformed, their individual identities strengthened rather than erased by what they'd shared. The spire's chamber dimmed to its normal glow as the last of the network's power subsided. Above them, the severed ships hung motionless in space alongside Earth and Celestian vessels. Through their remaining connection, Ethan and Naira could sense the change they'd catalyzed beginning to spread, not through technology or force, but through the simple, profound power of chosen connection. "What happens now?" Naira asked, her luminescence settling into a gentle rhythm that matched Ethan's heartbeat. Ethan smiled, taking her hand as they looked out at the stars that had just become a little less distant, a little less dark. "Now we do what humans have always done, we build something new. Together." Around them, the ancient ruins stood quiet once more, their purpose finally fulfilled. They had not been weapons or tools of power, but seeds planted by the predecessors, seeds that needed the combined strength of humanity's determination and the Celestians' understanding to flourish. And in the space between the stars, three species began the long, challenging, but ultimately hopeful work of learning to connect while celebrating their differences. It was not an ending, but a beginning, one that had started with a simple act of sacrifice on a distant ridge, proving once again that humanity's greatest strength lay not in power or technology, but in the willingness to reach across the darkness and forge connections that could transform the universe itself.